everyone, my name is Inesu and welcome to my channel called Bubble Sue. The main focus that I want the future of this channel is to be some sort of safe haven where I can express my thoughts, feelings and opinions based on past and present events. Anything that I discuss here is purely just my opinion and based off my own observations. Don't take it as a fact, and I'm also open to being wrong and hearing actually your own opinions on these topics. Again, thank you for clicking onto this video. Now, let's get into it. The topic of this video, as you can tell by the title, is a focus on intersectionality and how it's mainly rooted in segregation, as it can be hard for white women to relate to other women of colour and black women. But white feminism is when white women refuse to acknowledge their privilege and claim not to see race as an issue. And in fact, even if you look back at the suffragette movement, there is not even a drop of colour, essentially. And of course, not all white women think like this, but you tend to see, even with like girlhood and womanhood videos that go viral on TikTok, it's all just white women, and you never really see any diversity in these videos because, of course, that there can't be, because how can they relate to oppression and prejudice that we face, even excluding the queer community? And of course, not all white women think like this. I mean, that's impossible. Not all white women think like this, but a majority that do tend to have the loudest voices in the room, and we tend to see the white savior trope that is really present throughout the media now, like incredibly present, and it tends to sort of erase the black voice. And even an example of this can be white missionaries who settled in Africa, and instead of really teaching lessons of the Bible, whilst they were perhaps doing those teachings, they were able to really erase the indigenous culture and make it seem as if you were to become a Christian, that's sort of your closeness to whiteness, white proximity, very, 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 very disingenuous. And as a result, whiteness and Christianity in Africa are sort of linked. And if you're an African that doesn't practice these, and who doesn't practice Christianity, or even other religions, you're deemed as like just some sort of like radical, when really, even with traditions and culture, it's all come down to results in like colorism, and it can be that the intention was never really to ever help women of colour and black women. It was only really for their personal gain, and we end up seeing how costly that affected the community, because even with my own observations, I've seen that African Christians are put on a much bigger pedestal than other Africans that practice other religions, especially Islam. And we see how Islamophobia is quite rampant now today, and it's quite chilling, because even as a Christian myself, I see the treatment that I get towards others who perhaps don't openly practice Christianity. And even with the white savior trope, it's almost as if it's like, oh, thank you so much for doing this for us, we're so grateful. Almost as if it's not like just a human right to be treated equally. And the white savior trope has been so heavily, to be honest, media really reflects the world, and how everything happens, but you have to question how long it's going to take for us to really have a proper conversation and sit down and wonder how it's possible for everyone to have a practicing religion, but at the same time not feel not seek the validation that they need to, because we've seen like a sort of renaissance in like black culture for the past like 30-20 years, and it's only recently now with social media I personally feel like social media has definitely helped us as a community to realize that, yeah, like we're like we're fine how we are with our braids and our cornrows and our afro, because even myself, like I'm not taking it for granted how I can just wear my natural hair out without probably, I mean it has happened to me, but now there's like real repercussions that people face, because of course it's racist to say that someone can't come to work with their hair in their natural form, in their natural state. And we've even seen the right recognition now that even certain artists are getting, from starting dance trends and starting singing, like just overall just no longer listening to the BS that people have to say that, oh, but everyone is unique. Well, of course, but how come it tends to be the black community or people of colours cultures and traditions that were once deemed unacceptable be taken, and now it's okay because it's a new trend, like the mob wives trend, like please. And even now with the new like activism trend and how people ones who say, yeah, like, you know, I'm so sorry, excuse me, I'm someone that is all for equality, but once it comes down to it, they're nowhere to be seen. And with what's happening now in Palestine, and how the same people who claim to want to have equality for everyone, it's only pick and choose. And we see with Breonna Taylor how that happened, where so many people during George Floyd were speaking out, but once Breonna Taylor came out, it was almost as if like, oh no, but we can't talk about Breonna, there's too many victims, as if Breonna isn't a victim herself, and to be, she was even killed in her own home. There's no need to compare the level of pain and trauma. Every person who is murdered by police brutality is not right. Like, that's obvious. Yet people refuse to acknowledge that. And I mean, we're stepping into a new renaissance, like I said, where us as black women and women of colour are no longer taking what people are saying face value. We already know that it's BS, and I'm sort of loving seeing how this new generation, and my generation included, how we're no longer seeking validation from the white man, but are actually realizing that, like, yeah, we're fine on our own, and we're no longer sticking to the system. We're able to give ourselves our own accolades and our own rewards. Yes, it would be nice to have a reward and accolade, but we no longer need that anymore.
We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. That, in fact, it may be necessary to encounter defeats so we can know who the hell we are. What can we overcome? What makes us stumble and fall and somehow miraculously rise and go on? I know that a diamond is a result of extreme pressure. Less time and less pressure, and it's just crystal or coal or fossilized leaves or just dirt.
So, The Handmaid's Tale and The House of the Dragon are both revolutionary TV shows, and in my opinion, they've definitely had a massive impact on pop culture. Both shows were actually adapted from a TV show, from a book, and have created massive conversations around politics and even religion, forcing individuals to actually challenge even their own previous assumptions that they perhaps once had on certain topics. And I'm first going to get into Serena, who is a very interesting character. I mean, first of all, Alison and Serena, who were both prominent characters in their show, have distinguishable characteristics, but they almost parallel one another because both characters believe that if they were to succumb to the misogyny and sexist system, that they would be rewarded for their efforts and praised for it. But actually, the complete opposite happens, and they both meet quite terrible fates. But even then, are still faced with the repercussions of it, of what the men actually did, the men that created the problem. So in The Handmaid's Tale, Christianity is used to form the government of Gilead, and the main character in the books and the TV show, June, actually states that she remembers seeing Serena being on like Christian TV shows and going on panel discussions about basically the need for society to go back into like the medieval ages where, you know, Christianity, there was only one law, one religion, and everyone had to abide by it. And that's why, you know, times would move so quick, and allegedly now apparently times are moving slow because people are no longer following the religious text. And once Gilead is formed, women's degrees, bank accounts, just the entire human rights are all eradicated. And what's funny is that Serena, before Gilead, was an educated woman. She had her degrees. She could freely speak up actually about her own opinion. But once Gilead was formed, Serena actually tries to do that again in terms of wanting her child to be able to read the Bible. But even then, she's punished for it, which is quite ironic because Serena has always been someone to speak up her mind. Well, I say speak up her mind, but you can tell the with the Gilead government and the system, she chose to fall in line instead of being outcasted, because what misogyny and sexism tends to do is it makes women who obviously who believe in equal rights as if they're the ones that are the problem. And with Serena, her being abused just for actually choosing something that would have actually made sense in their world for their daughters to read the Bible, but women were not allowed to read in Gilead. And it only dawned on her then that she, even before, she and the wives would be essentially the first and last generation of women if Gilead was to continue to be able to read. And she then goes on to even become much worse. And I mean, she's already a terrible character, but her being aware that Gilead would encourage the abuse of many women, such as the handmaidens, and as long as Serena got her goal, she was completely fine with it. And it's not until we see really how she is negatively impacted by this herself, because once she moves to Canada and she gives birth to her own child, she only receives a fragment of what the woman went through by having her child taken and sent to a detention centre, and not years and years of abuse that is continuous. Because I'm not sure if I said this in my white savior complex, but and even with white feminism, but it only takes a fragment of white feminism to really not even understand really, to gradually know the pain that other women of colour and black women go through. Because it's unfortunate that Serena's child was taken away from her, but at the same time, for someone like her to have been okay with the abuse of women to continue for such a long time, you know, someone like her shouldn't be having a child, whereas the women that were abused continuously in Gilead, who had their children taken away from them, who were basically breeding machines, that won't, all their entire pain of what Serena just went through won't even cover. And The Handmaiden's Tale, I remember Margaret Atwood, so she did an interview, I can't remember where, but this quote that she said, people were asking her, how could you come up with something so wicked? And she was like, nah, this has been happening and it's still happening. It's just that some of us are unaware because we live in the Western world, where, I mean, even then, now what's being known about what's going on in like Palestine, but we live in the Western world where we 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 have the option to go to university and to get a degree if we want to, or just do whatever we want. Whereas like some people in other countries that aren't as well developed are abused continuously, and there is definitely power dynamics and there's levels to, you know, the social, like just the social class. And I think The Handmaid's Tale is a brilliant parallel because it's right on Christianity and how it can really go that far if people are not careful and if they choose wisely on what they really want. But then again, if you're a terrible person, you're a terrible person, and that's what Serena is, unfortunately. So with Alison, actually, who is from the House of the Dragon, from the get-go, she does not have it good at all. I mean, in George R. R. Martin's world, it's very obvious that women are second class citizens, maybe not even that, maybe like even third class citizens. Animals are probably put above women, to be honest. I'm only basing again my knowledge from the TV show and maybe just snippets from the book. But yeah, from the jump, Alison just does not have it good. We see her being used as a pawn by her father at an early age just for her father to gain political power. And you know, they're quite hard scenes to watch in that TV show because, I mean, no one wants to sleep. No one wants to get with an old man. Like, come on, like, no one wants to do that. But for someone, and you know, in George R. R. Martin's world, women are basically not safe wherever they go. And for someone in Alison's position, being at such, actually being quite privileged as a, I wouldn't say nepo baby, but I feel like that's the term I can maybe use the most. Apologies, I know it's a terrible term to compare to Alison, but I feel like that's the closest thing I can do. She is privileged. You know, she lives in a wealthy home. She's part of a wealthy house, the High Towers, but she's not exempt from the abuse and the power dynamics that occur. And you know, her and Rhaenyra actually, which I found, which was like my first like observation from the TV show, is that Rhaenyra is sort of mirrors the girl who doesn't fall into like the misogynistic and like sexist, not stereotype, sorry, I don't want to say that, um the classic way of, oh, you know, you're a woman, you need to act like a lady. Rhaenyra does what she wants, and you can say many factors influence that because she's the daughter of the king, which I agree with, but and she's able to get away with a lot of stuff that I do agree with, but Rhaenyra does have freedom in the sense of, you know, being able to have love who she loves, even though she was put in an arranged marriage, but sort of, I wouldn't say get away, she does get away with things, but Rhaenyra is sort of able to really go through girlhood, whereas Alison, by the time she's 14, she's already had 2 kids. And I want to talk about blood and the use of it in the House of the Dragon because Alison is already pregnant with her, like her second child, Aegon, by the time she's 14. And there's, I think it's episode 3 or 4, where they go to some banquet, or I can't remember where they went, but they just went out somewhere. And whilst Alison is pregnant with her second child, sitting with all these older women too, who are clearly not the same age as her, but you know, it's this whole like, it's very uncomfortable just seeing her there because you're thinking she should not be there. But with Rhaenyra, what she does is that she goes to the woods, and I think she's attacked by a wolf, and she ends up killing the wolf, and she comes back drained in the blood. And because it's like the ending of the episode, and what I got from that was, it's quite symbolic because Rhaenyra is a young girl, and around that age is when most young women start their menstrual cycle. But Alison is already pregnant with her second kid, and I feel like her being pregnant is blocking her from her menstrual cycle. And obviously, periods are a part of girlhood, womanhood. And whilst Rhaenyra is actually smothered in it, and she's entering that corridor, Alison is not. She can't because there's so many rules, like there's so many restrictions put around her that she physically and literally cannot go through a normal childhood, a normal girlhood. And we see that manifest into her adult life, where she ends up becoming part of the Faith of the Seven. The Faith of the Seven is basically a parallel to Christianity in our world. And, you know, Rhaenyra marries Daemon, you know, they have their kids. And when they come back, they see their entire house, well, Rhaenyra's entire house, even Daemon's actually, yeah, entire house, instead of dragons, is replaced with monuments of the Faith of the Seven. And that even goes back to, you know, my white savior complex, where, you know, these white missionaries would go into villages in Africa and erase indigenous culture, and even like burn down trees, kill animals, just to remove people from their ancestral land and sort of rip it apart. And you see that with Alison and the Faith of the Seven, is that the Faith of the Seven's main goal actually in Westeros is literally to make sure Westeros is a country that is, no, yeah, a country that is ruled by the faith and not just by like men who don't have a religion. And they're very against actually the Targaryens, who is Rhaenyra's family, ruling essentially, because, you know, they're the only thing that they have going, basically the Targaryens, is the dragons, and the Targaryens have their own practices as well. And the Targaryens are quite proud. I mean, they're messy, but you can tell that they're really proud of being Targaryens and like Valerians and all that shit. And Alicent uses Feather the Seven to cope with her trauma. And even when Rhaenyra and Daemon came back, their first conversation, you know, Rhaenyra was like, "Girl, like, what have you done to my house?" And Alicent just responds back in such a stoic way, with like, not even stoic, like, it's really creepy. She says that, "Oh, the mother of the light will forgive you, so I shall too." Like, that is so Christian girl coded, when you've pissed someone off who's a Christian and they don't want to smack you. Like, it's so interesting to see how George R. R. Martin was so able to like cleverly write Alicent's character into uh into a woman who is now, her anger is so misdirected that you, I mean, that's a great character development. You feel bad for her, because even once they're elder, you can still see the different treatment. Like, Alicent is still told what to do, and she's still swayed to like gain more political gain for her father, even after she's birthed like 50 fucking kids. Like, that's not enough, because, you know, essentially her dad wants to also be in charge of Westeros, essentially, and have his bloodline, some stupid, yeah, bloodline on the bloody throne. And, you know, you feel the tension building up, and then eventually, once, I think it was Aegon's eye is cut out by one of Rhaenyra's kids. And even with the kids, you can tell the kids are very, it's just, you know, the effects on the kids are just, yeah, it's all messy. And clearly Rhaenyra's given a pass by her dad and everyone else, because, you know, she's the daughter of the king, she's the next in line to the throne. But Alicent ends up getting the dagger, and she cuts Rhaenyra, and that can be symbolic in terms of, because I mean, Alicent confirms what everyone else has been thinking. Like, that entire conversation they have, the heated moment between them two, it's like, yeah, Alicent's like, "How come you get away with everything and I've put myself through so much trauma, and I haven't received anything?" And that was back to what I was saying, that like, these women can do so much for the cause, and not receive any accolade, any reward, and actually face much worse repercussions, because Alicent ends up losing all her kids, and Rhaenyra's child is the one that ends up on the throne eventually, even though Rhaenyra gets murdered by her brother, which is Alicent's child. And Alicent, back to the dagger in the conversation, Alicent ends up getting the dagger, cutting Rhaenyra after they've, you know, had that heated argument, and blood obviously draws out, and you can say that is actually Alicent's way of wanting to release her life and become a woman who is free, and to freely do whatever she wants to do, such as Rhaenyra. And the closest thing she can get to that is drawing blood from Rhaenyra, of course, physically and emotionally, because again, like Addison wasn't it just like, you know what I mean, like at 14 to be pregnant with your second kid but not go through, that's just not normal, you know what I mean? I mean, nothing is normal in Westeros, but I feel like maybe killing a wolf is much normal than being pregnant at like 14 with your second kid. But eventually, Alison, like I said, ends up losing all her children, which is very unfortunate because her children were sort of like a way for her, like was essentially what the dad wanted. And I mean, fuck Otto Hightower because that guy's a cunt. I mean, maybe YouTube's gonna like take this down, but I don't care really because he is. And afterwards, it sort of just seems like, yeah, it was for nothing because Alison ends up becoming, she ends up succumbing to like a horrible disease with like no one around her that loves her, that truly loves her. And you can maybe say the only person that really loved her was her daughter Helena. I mean, not even that, that's a far stretch. Perhaps Rhaenyra. Yeah, Rhaenyra was really the only person that cared about her, but at least Rhaenyra had the decency to understand that like these men are full of shit. Alison didn't really, but you can't blame her because she didn't have the time to really like emotionally like grow, because even if you think about it, like her kids, like she's 14, like they could literally be siblings, her and her children. And even when they're fighting, Alison isn't dumb to say. It's just she again, Rainey, who is another character, a prominent character in the series, tells Alison that, babe, you've made a little window in your prison, because if she was so aware all of a sudden now, because when they're trying to get sides after King Viserys dies, Alison goes to Rhaenyra's and it's like, come join the green side, like we'll protect you. And then Alison even uses the like, oh, but I knew you were always meant to be the queen. And then Rhaenyra is like, if you knew that was meant to be the queen, how can you not see this happening again with what's going on now? And you can even speak with like in what's been happening in the past 2 years with Roe vs Wade, and how like a lot of like conservative Christian women do not see that if this can be overturned, then the privilege of us even having our own bank accounts and our own names without having to get permission from a male figure, that possibly could happen too. It may already be in the works because such privileges can be taken away if we're not careful. But at the end of the day, both Alison and Serena are basically the parallel of many unfortunate women who think that if they are a part of the problem, that somehow the problem will miraculously benefit them, which it doesn't, of course. But to be honest, that's all I really have to say. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have recording it. Please don't forget to leave a like, share and comment down below, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I'd love to hear your opinions on it, truly. But other than that, yeah, have a great day.